Hello everybody, thank you very much for coming. So this is a talk about Steam Greenlight. So it's going to be mainly aimed at people that are either currently developing their own games or interested in developing their own games and are looking at releasing them commercially. So just before I get started and before I introduce myself, just to kind of give me an impression of who's here and what it is you're interested in. Put your hand up if you've heard of Steam to start with. Perfect. Put your hand up if you've heard of Steam Greenlight. Perfect. Who is thinking about going through Greenlight? Brilliant. Who's currently going through Greenlight? Oh, how are you doing?
I think we're 31% there or so.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say on these. I got up to about 48% of the way there.
31. In what sort of a time?
I got to 40% in 2 days.
Okay, brilliant.
I've dropped now. I'm back down to 30.
Yeah, that's depressing when that happens, isn't it? And what about?
Yeah, I think we've been up for maybe about 4 days or so.
4 days. Okay, so really quite new then. And who here has gone through Greenlight? Nobody. Okay, so for those of you that have looked into it or are going through it, I should say that everything that I'm about to say during my talk is just purely my own personal opinion. You only need to go through Greenlight once. So by definition, I've only ever done this successfully once because I've only ever needed to. So if I say something that's completely against your guys' experience or what you found and discovered, please do shout out, and I'm keen to hear differing opinions, because everything that I'm about to say is just my own experience rather than huge amounts of expertise. So just to introduce myself, my name's Scott Grandison, and I'm kind of here with two different hats on. Hat number one is I have the world's largest job title at Norwich University of the Arts. So I'm the Teaching Fellow for Digital Transformation and Creative Coding. So that basically means that I teach people at the university, and I've only been there about 7 months, how to do creative things with computer programming. So I'm a computer programmer by trade, but I don't tend to work in things like, databases or insurance applications. I used to work in insurance, but I don't work in insurance anymore. So it's all about teaching people how to do interesting, innovative, new, exciting, artistic things with computer programming. And I'm also a director at Outsider Studios, which is an independent game development studio that's been in operation since 2011, and worked on a whole bunch of projects that I'll mention very briefly during the talk. And it was a game that we've done with Outsider Studios that we got greenlit. It's only kind of standing up here that I realised the subtitle to my talk, "You Can Be a Deadbeat Too," out of context sounds terribly strange, but that's related to the game Wailing Heights, which we got through Greenlight. From submission to being greenlit took 6 days, which was quite far. Some games staying there for months. So that's related to the game, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a bit. So just to give a little bit of background on me, I've been playing games my whole life. I started playing games on things like the ZX81 and the VIC-20 back in the 1980s. And back in the day, I feel like I have an advantage over anybody that wants to learn to program nowadays. Because back in the day, you could be 8 and know everything that there was to know about these computers inside and out, because they just weren't that complicated. And nowadays, computers are so complicated, nobody understands even a fraction of how they're put together and how they work. So I kind of grew up in this sort of the bedroom coder days. So there's a really good documentary called From Bedrooms to Billions that talks about the early days of game development and how it's turned into the biggest entertainment industry in the world. And actually, things like Steam and Greenlight and the iOS App Store and the Android App Store have more or less brought that full circle. There was a time in the 90s where games were starting to get movie-sized budgets, and movie-sized teams working on them, that it really excluded independent game developers. But now actually you can have small one-man, two-man, four-man teams and so on working on projects, and it's really a new golden age of development, because we're seeing way more innovative things than we would have done if people were sticking with multi-million dollar budgets. So I was into computing for a while. I went and studied at university, so I did a physics degree here at Birmingham University, looking very dramatic there. And then after that, I just went into insurance. So I worked in the insurance industry for about 8 years as a programmer, working on various different companies on various different projects within the insurance industry. And then I decided to go back to academia. I had a very early midlife crisis. And I went back to academia and I did a PhD in mathematics. So my background is kind of in science. So this is an extract from my PhD that I did at UEA. At one point in my life I would have understood this, that I wrote, but it's all a little bit grey to me now. I continued to work at UEA after that, running my own research lab, and then just kind of got a little bit tired of academic life, and that's when I left and set up Outsider Games. So this was the first game that we created. So it was a little kids game, sort of a little kids balancing game, and that was sufficient. So from a financial point of view, it didn't make us a huge amount of money, but actually being able to demonstrate when you're looking at working for other people that you can successfully create and ship a game made a huge difference in terms of actually being able to get work and people taking us seriously. It wasn't the fact that this was a huge bestseller, because it wasn't. It was the fact that we had the demonstrated ability to ship something that was reasonably good, that people paid attention to. And then most of the time, we've spent from 2011 up until the end of 2014 working on work for hire stuff. So this was stuff that earned us money because we were getting paid to create the games, but the games were ultimately being owned by a third party. So we were creating games for other people, and we kind of found this niche where we were doing what you could kind of consider games as marketing. So they weren't necessarily being sold for money, but they were being used in conjunction with the release of, for example, a movie or a TV show or something like that. And the game came out of the marketing budget of a company, and that was what was it was there to sell the movie rather than actually to drive sales itself. So we worked on an unreleased Keith Lemon project. I was going to tell you more about this, which is why the slide is in here, but it's being streamed on the internet, which I didn't realise, so I'm not going to be as frank about this project as I ordinarily would have been. We worked on, I think the honour, as far as I know, of being the only programmer that has a game about male strippers in the Apple App Store, which I'm very proud about. So we did a game for Sony Lionsgate Movies based on the Magic Mike movie. It's kind of like a Guitar Hero kind of a game. And on the back of that, that's how we started doing lots of work in the motion picture industry. That was a very stressful few days. We did a bunch of projects for the BBC, so this is one of them. This is a game designed to be played on what used to be these huge screens that they had outside the front of Chapel Field Mall, for example, that isn't there anymore. So this was in the year of the Olympics, and the BBC wanted a bunch of games that people could play in wide open public spaces. The idea was that they'd be there watching the Olympics, and in between there'd be these sort of crowd games that people could play. This is another movie-based project that we did, based on a film that deserves more people to see it than did, called Eddie the Sleepwalking Cannibal. That's sort of like a horror comedy, but this was kind of our bread and butter for the last 5 years, doing work for other companies and other studios. But through that, we kind of built up enough money in the bank to essentially be able to take a year to employ new staff. So the company's owned by myself, and an artist called Stephen Downey, and much of all of the work that you've seen up until this point was done by the two of us, bringing in contractors, so people like voice artists and musicians, to do other things. And at the end of 2014, we employed a very, very talented programmer called Rodney McConnell, and a very talented illustrator and animator called John McFarlane to work on our own IP, which is Wailing Heights. So it's a very weird, off-the-wall concept. So I'll show you the trailer in a second. But it's a point-and-click adventure. So it kind of has that traditional searching around for things, having dialogue with characters. The twist is, well, there are a few twists. One is that you've arrived in this very strange village called Wailing Heights that's populated entirely by mythical creatures. So there's werewolves and vampires and ghosts and all sorts of other weird creatures. And they don't get on terribly well. There's different factions. The vampires and the ghosts don't like each other. The werewolves don't like the ghosts because they can't smell them, and so on and so on. And you arrive. You're this aged rocker who ends up in this village, and you get the power to possess other people. So you can possess a werewolf if you find out something about them, or a vampire, or a ghost. And not only do the other characters react to you differently because there's all these different factions, but you gain the special abilities of a ghost or a werewolf or a vampire when you transform, which makes I think for an entertaining game, it's very complex, because if you think of all the different dialogue trees with different characters will react to you in different ways. So I'll show you the trailer now, and this is the trailer that we used for Greenlight. So that's the game that we went through Greenlight with. So we went through Greenlight after it had been in production for about 14 months, and we're just at the point where the game's going to be released in the next few weeks, so we don't know how well it's going to do. We're keeping our fingers crossed that it will do well, obviously. So to just summarise, even though you're all familiar with Steam, just to summarise what Steam is. So it's an app store. So probably most of us have got smartphones, used to the Google Play Store, the Apple App Store, and so on. And it's for PC, Mac, and Linux only. So you don't distribute to phones. It's just for desktop and laptop platforms. And it's more or less the only way that you can distribute games on these platforms. So some of the larger companies have their own distribution platforms like Origin and Uplay and things like that. But that's obviously only for the company itself, like Ubisoft. You could distribute things yourself if you wanted, and sell things through your website, like Minecraft did, like Notch did with Minecraft. But it's obviously very difficult to get noticed. So if you really do want to release a game for those platforms and you're an independent, this is really your only option. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's no other way to do it. And there's this barrier to entry, which is Greenlight. So if you want to go, I've released plenty of stuff onto the Android App Store and the Apple App Store, and there's pretty much no barrier to entry. You pay your developer fee, which is about £65, and it gets vetted. First of all, so the Google App Store is like the Wild West. It doesn't get vetted at all. You just upload your app and it's there. It's kind of sort of negatively vetted. If you upload it and then loads of people complain, it might get pulled. But literally you will upload it and within 5 minutes people can start downloading it. The Apple App Store is vetted to some extent, like they'll make sure you're not using any naughty APIs and your icons are consistent with each other and all sorts of kind of technical details like that. But there's no sort of vetting to make sure that your game's actually good or of any quality. You can get all sorts of rubbish. As you probably know if you have one of these phones, you can get all sorts of rubbish through there. And that makes the signal to noise ratio on these stores very, very low. That if you actually have a decent product out there, being noticed within the millions and millions of other products that are coming out, that month, it's very difficult to get noticed on that platform. And then you have these big social games where I can't remember the name of the game, but you have these social games where they can get Arnold Schwarzenegger to spam YouTube and TV adverts and things like that, and it's very difficult. They're looking for these whales, these people that spend an enormous amount of money on in-app purchases and things like that, and it's a very difficult marketplace as a complete independent to get into. And Steam isn't like that because there is this barrier to entry, which is what I'm here to talk about. Once you get through that, life seems like it's much easier. Anecdotally. So which is why I say there's potentially more money to be made. You're going for a bigger market, but you're a bigger fish in a smaller pond if you go through and distribute on Steam. There's less games. I forgot to look up how many games are currently on Steam, but it's in the several thousand rather than the several million that are on a smartphone app store. People are willing to pay more. It's quite easy to persuade people to spend £35 plus on a game on Steam for a full price big commercial release. For an independent release, it's quite common to see them out at the sort of £6.99 to £9.99 price point, and people are quite happy to pay that. Whereas the attitude on smartphone devices is, if it's more than 70p, then forget it. And I would rather persuade 100,000 people to pay £10 than 1 million people to pay £1. It seems like a better relationship with the number of people that you're talking to. Not drowned out by social games, like I just said, with these games that are looking for whales. And there's loads and loads of sales on Steam, and I'm testifying to this because I have about 650 games on Steam that I've purchased, and I've probably played a very tiny fraction of that number because there's things like the humble bundles, there's these enormous sales, but what it does, that's done by an algorithm, and it's done in such a way that it preserves this long tail, so you don't get this sudden leap in sales, and then after a couple of weeks it just dies off and you never sell another game again. What they're doing by doing these huge reductions, they're targeting people like me that go, well, it's only £1, I might as well go for it and see whether it's any good or not. And it sort of extends the life and the revenue of your game. So it's both from a customer point of view and from a developer point of view, I think it's a great platform to be involved in. They've got a refund policy on there. They let you share games with your friends. It's a really well thought out system. So like I say, as a developer and as a player, it's something that I'm really positive about. And then this is the barrier to entry that I was talking about, Greenlight. This is the thing that just prevents anybody from putting something onto their platform. So if you're a new publisher, so obviously Electronic Arts don't have to go through Greenlight every time they bring out a new Call of Duty game. But if you're a new developer or a new publisher of a game, you have to go through this Greenlight process. And our slate's slightly opaque because nobody really knows how you get greenlit. There's some elements that are clear, and there are some elements that really aren't. So to some extent, it's crowdsourced. So you create a page on Steam that's part of this Greenlight process, and this is you say, okay, we would like to get onto Steam, and people, players, look at all of these games that are coming up, and they can comment on it. They can ask questions. I'll show you our page in a bit. They can vote yes. They would like to see the game on Steam and they would like to play it. That commits them to nothing. It's just them saying, it's just them, giving a positive vibe of this is something that would be good on the Steam platform. No money changes hands. They're not compelled to buy it at any time in the future. It's just a vote of confidence in your product. They can also vote no to say that we don't want our lovely Steam platform muddied by your poor game. And then it's also to some extent curated by Valve, the company that own Steam, in a way that is mysterious. So it's clear that it isn't just an algorithm that's deciding you get a certain number of votes and then you're in, or you get into the top 100, then you're in. It seems to be that the crowdsourcing kind of gets you high enough in the charts for Valve to notice you, and then somebody at Valve looks at it and says, "Yeah, that looks like it's something that we would like on Steam. We'll thumbs up to it. We'll let you publish on our platform." This sounds vague because nobody really knows. It's this part crowdsourcing, but then part some internal process at Valve going on that we're not 100% sure about. This is what I was saying before. So it's crowdsourced, not crowdfunded. This isn't Kickstarter. We're not going on there asking for people for money. We're going on there asking for their vote of support to let us go on to this sort of community-run platform. There is a crowdfunding platform on Steam called Early Access, which means you basically you go through Greenlight, you release a very, very early version of your game, and people buy it because they want to fund your continued development. It's had a really bad reputation in the last 6 months to a year, where people have funded these underdeveloped things, and then the developers essentially gone AWOL, and people have kind of lost their money. That doesn't bother me personally, because that's the deal that you make when you fund something that's in early access. But early access kind of leaves a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth. So this is what I was saying. Process appears to be that public votes get you noticed, but then there's somebody at Valve making the final say. Maybe it's Gabe, maybe it isn't. Probably not Gabe. And you don't need a finished product. You don't even need a started product. You could go up there with the minimum requirement is you have an icon, a video, a screenshot, and a write-up. And that's all it has to be. And that video could even be you just speaking to the camera, talking about the concept of the game and showing some concept art. So when we went onto Steam, we didn't have a demo released. We had a playable game. The game was close to being finished when we went onto Steam. So the game was playable, but we chose not to release a demo because of the overhead of doing that. So you don't need anything, really. People aren't necessarily expecting to have a demo to download. It could just be the bare bones of an idea. But it has to be enough for people to kind of be into it and getting behind it. The risks that I'm talking about there is obviously you're asking for a vote of confidence for people, and the more information and evidence that you can give them, the more likely they are to upvote you. Getting to the top 100 is considered key. And again, this is just anecdotally. Games get greenlit that never make it into the top 100. Games make it into the top 100 and never get greenlit. So it's a measure of success, and it's something that I'll show you the behind the scenes dashboard for Greenlight in a little bit, and even the dashboard sort of puts getting into the top 100 on a pedestal. It tells you what percentage of the way you are to the top 100, and you guys will know that because you'll have spent the last week constantly refreshing that page, looking to see what's happening. You can be on Greenlight for months. So we run it for 6 days. I've never heard of anybody getting in that quickly before. I'm sure it's happened. I'm sure people have done it faster than we have, but that's considered quite quick. So to get onto Greenlight, you need a publisher's account, which costs $100, so about £65, and that's just to stop it from being spammed. I would guess Valve take that money and give it to charity. You set up a Greenlight page, which is just like a store page on the Steam App Store, and that's it. Like I say, you don't need a finished game, you don't need a started game, you don't need a demo. It could just be a cool concept, some artwork. But like I say, if people are voting on this product about whether they want to see it, see the light of day, the more information you can give them, obviously the better they are to be able to judge and hopefully judge your game positively. So this is what we had. We had a nearly complete game. Most of the elements of the game were there. Most of the work that's been done since we went on to Greenlight has been things like bug fixing and polishing and all of that sort of stuff. Most of the stuff was in there. We had fantastic artwork. I can say that because I'm not an artist, so I can't claim any responsibility for the artwork, but the game looks really good. We had a very polished video that Stephen took a long time over to get it right. We had big name involvement, so for quite a while now, I've been quite heavily involved in the comic book industry. The co-director of Outsider Games comes from a comic book industry background. He started out as a professional comic book artist and has done stuff on Torchwood, all sorts of other things. And part of the strategy for Wailing Heights is we recruited a bunch of artists and famous comic book writers that had never worked in the games industry before to do various elements of the artwork for us. So the ghosts were created by Glenn Fabry, who created Preacher, very famous comic book series, and so on. And that gives you this kind of big name involvement, that people that are fans of that kind of medium are seeing that these people are working within the games industry, and that draws attention to you. And obviously these people are very well known, have thousands of Twitter followers, so if they mention your game on Twitter, that's quite nice. And the game's kind of weird, right? It's a game about possessing supernatural creatures in a village where the vampires are all hipsters and frequent a coffee bar listening to depressing music. And the weirdness for us, maybe not weirdness, the uniqueness for us was a strength on Steam. I think if we'd have got the same number of votes in the same amount of time and it was an FPS, we probably wouldn't have had the success on Greenlight that we did, simply because FPS is a tenner penny. The fact that we're genuinely going to a lot of effort to do something original and different, I think was kind of a strength. Not necessarily a strength if you're trying to get a publishing deal, but a strength in terms of actually, and a lot of the comments, we had hundreds of comments on our Greenlight page, and a lot of the comments were related to the game looking original and different and new, and so on. So these are some of the people that were involved in it. So Declan, who's worked on Deadpool, Captain America, Wolverine, Stephen, who's done Batman, an Angel, and like I say, these are all big names from the comic book industry that we could tweet about and do lots of publicity on. So this is our Greenlight page. So this is the publicly facing bit of the page. So I'll show you the public bit, and then I'll show you the secret bit in a second. So this is we've been greenlit. So this bit at the top just tells everybody that we're greenlit. So on your page, so this is because this page is logged in as Outsider Games. You can see down on the right hand side, you can edit things, change your images and videos and stuff like that. There's a bit for announcements where we can talk about news about the game. And whilst you're in Greenlight, it's really good to sort of be regularly making announcements because it keeps sort of people interested and shows that you're active. We had a little bit of an intro, so welcome to Wailing Heights. On the actual page, everything that you see here is fully animated as well. So all of the characters are moving, which is quite unusual on a Greenlight page, and is quite striking when you see it. So a quick summary of the game. We talk about the weird story, where the game's going, give them a little bit of an impression of what's happening. We describe the gameplay, so concentrating on this sort of unique possession mechanic. We talk about the team, so we talk about Stephen's background, my background, all of the different people that worked on it. Kevin Beamer's worked on it, who you might know from his most recent release was his theoretical physics platform game, Schrodinger's Cat, which is fantastic. He also did Hector Badge of Carnage, which is a very well-known point-and-click adventure published by Telltale. So he's been fantastic. This is the stats page. This is the page that you only get to see if you're a developer. So we've got a button here that says we can continue our submission and get the game on. So let's show what stats they give you. So this box over the right hand side where it says unique visitors, 6,495, that changes depending on how far you are through the Greenlight process. So when your game first goes onto Steam, because they put being in the top 100 on a pedestal, it gives you the percentage of yes votes that you've got to be in the top 100. So it says you're 20% of the way there or 40% of the way there. And then once you get into the top 100, it tells you what position you are in the top 100. So it's now like you're in the top 100 on Steam, you're in the top 80 on Steam, 50 on Steam, and so on. It shows you the number of yes votes that you've had, so the number of people that say yes, we want the game, and the number of people that are following it, so they'll get updates and things like that. And then it shows you a bunch of stats for your game on the left-hand column here, and then the average for games that are in the top 50 on Steam. So we've had 6,500 visitors. The average for the top 50 is just over 12,000, so about half the way there. Tells you about the number of people that have favorited it, the number of people that are following it, and it tells you the breakdown of yes votes and no votes for both you and the top 50. So 59% of people voted yes for us, 41% voted no, and that's almost exactly in line with the percentage of people that vote yes and no for the other games in the top 50. There's a difference of 2% in each category. And obviously, as games get greenlit and new games go onto Greenlight, all of these statistics can change. Because if a game's got 1 million votes and then it gets greenlit, then it's no longer in Greenlight. So those statistics don't count. So the average number of votes in the top 50 can go down just as much as it can go up as things get taken off of Greenlight. So it shows you the breakdown of yes and no votes. This chart on the left is really interesting. It shows you how your game is, the rate at which your game is accumulating yes votes compared to other games that are in various positions on the Steam Greenlight chart. So that bright yellow line, I know I've been told not to step away from the mic, but I'm going to for a second. This bright yellow line is us, and that's the 6-day point at which we got Greenlight, so that's why it flattens out after that point. The red line, that rapidly increasing red line, is how quickly the game that's currently in number 5 on Greenlight accumulated votes. So at a vast rate, really, really fast. And then the cyan one is the number 10, orange is number 15, purple is number 20, and so on. So we accumulated votes at the same rate as the number 20 game on Steam Greenlight did when I took a screenshot of this page, which was a few days ago, which was kind of in par with how we did. We got to the top 20, then sort of plateaued a little bit, and then got greenlit. And this is really fascinating to watch. And because games come in and out of Greenlight all the time and get into the top 100 all the time, you can see that, you know, some games are just flat for weeks, and then something happens and they explode, and then they get greenlit really quickly after that. Some games just explode, you know, very, very quickly, that get greenlit and then disappear. So it's not necessarily, there's not much that you can necessarily do about that data, but it's really interesting to see that data. And then this is how we accumulated visits and votes over time. Obviously, as soon as you greenlit, you're off the store, so it drops very quickly. And then this is the email that if you go onto Greenlight, you're waiting for. So we got this January 28th after being for 6 days. So congratulations, Wailing Heights has been greenlit. And at that point, you're a developer on Greenlight, so you can go ahead and publish games on that platform, and they give you access to their commercially sensitive information. So Apple, the Apple App Store and the Google App Store, just publish what percentage cut they take. To go through this process, we have to sign something that says we're not allowed to reveal that, and we're not allowed to reveal things like the marketing advice that you get when you're considered a Steamworks developer. So kind of from our first kind of experience of doing this, these are kind of the take-home messages that I took away. Just going on to Greenlight gets you loads and loads of attention. Even if you don't get greenlit, then you'll almost certainly have gathered a following for the game, which in itself is a positive thing. So in just a few days, we had thousands of visitors to the Greenlight page. The number of hits on our web page just exploded. Hundreds of comments on the page. There was an article about us on Kotaku, which is one of the main game publishing blogs with millions of visitors. Just through complete coincidence, and it was total coincidence, we went on to Greenlight the day after David Bowie died. And this is a game about a sexually ambiguous aging rocker who's like in an undead world. And there was this article on Kotaku that was basically saying, surely these guys could have done this in 24 hours. We've had reaction videos done of the game, which is the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. And so I'm going to show it. It's not relevant to Steam, but I personally think this is the greatest video ever shot, which is somebody watching our trailer. So it goes on like that. But, the reason I wanted to show that is because if you're working on a game in more or less isolation with nobody seeing it for 15 months, two things tend to happen. First of all, you can get a little bit sick of it to some extent. You know, you're working with this thing all the time, and at the same time, not that you get sick of it because we're very enthusiastic about it, but you know, there's pressure on you, and you is it good? Is it working? We think it's good. Is it going to be successful? And you're doing this behind closed doors, and then you see a reaction like that to the trailer, and it just fills your heart with joy. It's just so positive to see people reacting positively to your game, and it's a wonderful thing. So that's why I wanted to show it, not to in any negative way, but it was just a wonderful thing to see. Next thing I would say is when you're on Greenlight, make Greenlight your job, because your game, like if you're an independent developer, you're not just a programmer or an artist. If you believe in your game, you owe it to your game to do the best you possibly can for it, and that makes you a marketer and a social butterfly, even if you're not, and all of these other things. And if you're getting hundreds of comments, some of which are really negative, most of them are positive, but some of them are really negative. You need to be on top of that. You need to call in all of your favours. If you've got friends that work in publishing or have a podcast or anything, speak to them and get them to talk about it. Concentrate all of your marketing into a short burst to try and start to accumulate those votes and go up as quickly as you possibly can, because attention breeds attention. Once you're in the top 100, people pay a lot more attention to you than when you're out of the top 100. So actually just rocketing up as quickly as possible is better than just trying to spread out this marketing over weeks or months. So it's good to be weird, which our game certainly is in lots of ways. Like I say, it's clear in inverted commas, because nobody really knows, but I believe you're not getting greenlit by just an algorithm. There's somebody at Valve that's curating this process actively. So you get votes that grab the attention of Valve, and then something magical happens. So like I said before, if we got the same votes with some sort of generic FPS, would we have been greenlit? I don't know. I don't think so. And then respond to questions and comments. Look at all of the comments that people are making, and if it's positive or negative, respond to those questions. You know, about when it's coming out, or you know, if it's why does your game look so terrible? You know, respond to that one as well. There's been a couple of times where there was one particular comment where somebody said something, and I wrote a very robust reply. And then decided to delete it, and then Stephen wrote the reply after that. But people can be really nasty sometimes. So that was the reaction video that I was going to show. And then keep on top of it all. So have Twitter alerts set up. If somebody tweets about the game, you should know about it straight away. Set up Google alerts. So every time somebody mentions your game, you should know that it got mentioned. And if it's on a website like Kotaku, or if it's on any website at all, follow up and say, thanks for mentioning us. Do you want an interview? Do you want a demo? Do you want some publicity materials or something like that? And then, so breaking news, 1:29 a.m. Our store page has been approved by Valve. So they've looked through it. We're now ready to release. Well, the game needs to be finished, but as far as Steam is concerned, we're ready to release. So this should be, hopefully, in the very short future, the game is going to be coming out. Hopefully it will do well. I'm going to skip over that page because we're being streamed. And that was everything I wanted to talk about. I talked for longer than I was planning, but am I allowed to take questions? Okay, 2 quick questions.
You said you only have to go through the greenlight process once.
Yeah.
Does that mean once one game gets greenlit, the next game is automatically on greenlight?
That's my belief. Yes. So the thing that gets. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry to repeat the question. Do you only need to get greenlit once? My belief is yes, because the fact that you've been greenlit is the thing that lets you publish a game to the store, and that's attached to your developer's account. Yeah. Hi.
Hi. So recently, a 14-year-old managed to get a game on greenlit, circling down getting all of this.
Okay.
I don't know if you heard about.
No, I didn't.
I was going to ask what your opinion on that on, but without the details behind that, it might be a bit difficult. Yes, reported in the news, I think 3 or 4 days ago, that a 14-year-old basically put a game on Greenlight, active to buy, and it was paint drying on a wall, and it was a game that lasted 2 minutes of paint drying on a wall, but basically bypassed all of that.
Okay, so to repeat that, there was a 14-year-old that got a game based on paint drying on the wall, greenlit very, very quickly, and what my thoughts on that were. My first thought is that's better than some of the games that I've played on Steam. So it's not a flawless process. I imagine that he had either had somebody like 4chan behind him doing it for the lulz, or had some massive social media presence. The process is by far from flawless. Gabe Newell said a couple of years ago that he wanted to ditch Greenlight because he didn't think it was serving them very well. But from my point of view, I think it's a positive thing. The fact that it's a walled garden and that it's curated, just because occasionally the odd vandal manages to get through, doesn't negate the process for me, and that it's a valuable thing. So I'm happy to chat to people. I'm happy to show you the slide that I skipped over very quickly because we're being streamed. But before I finish, at the back there's been a collection for Special Effect, which is a charity that makes special devices to help disabled children play games. So it's a very worthy charity. So if you have some spare change, then drop it in at the back. Otherwise, I'll continue to hang around here or outside if we get booted out, and I'm happy to chat to people. And best of luck on Greenlight. Thank you.